Before we dive in, please remember that I am not a financial advisor. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. The world of cryptocurrency is highly volatile and carries significant risk. You should always conduct your own research and consult with a qualified financial professional before making any investment decisions. Any actions you take based on the information in this presentation are solely at your own risk. You've heard the stories. The coworker who casually mentioned paying for a vacation with some crypto he bought years ago. The kid on TikTok who keeps talking about NFTs and digital art. And every single time you feel that familiar pang of anxiety, it's a voice in your head that says, "I've missed it. It's too late. It's too complicated for me." You see the headlines, you hear the jargon, blockchain, decentralization, Ethereum, mining, and it feels like trying to learn a foreign language while everyone else is already fluent. That feeling, that sense of being on the outside looking in on what might be the biggest shift in technology and finance in our lifetime, is exactly why this series exists. This is not another video promising to make you a millionaire overnight. This is a promise of something far more valuable: clarity. Over the next 10 parts, we are going to build your crypto knowledge from absolute scratch. Brick by brick. We're going to take you from zero, from feeling confused and overwhelmed, to having a rock-solid, practical, and confident understanding of this entire space. By the end of this, you won't just know what Bitcoin is. You will understand why it was created and the problem it's trying to solve. You won't just hear about smart contracts. You'll grasp how they are attempting to rebuild the internet from the ground up. You will gain the most important skill in this new economy: the ability to cut through the noise, to separate the groundbreaking technology from the speculative hype, and to finally make your own informed decisions. So, to start, we need to do one thing. Forget everything you think you know about crypto. Just for a moment, let's wipe the slate clean. Forget the headlines about billionaires tweeting about dog-themed coins. Forget the stories of people losing their life savings on a scam. And forget the idea that this is just magic internet money for tech nerds and criminals. All that is noise. The signal, the real story, is much bigger and much more important. To understand it, we have to go back to the internet in 1995. Imagine trying to explain email to someone who has only ever used a fax machine. You'd say, "You can send a message to anyone in the world, instantly, for free." They'd look at you and say, "Why would I need that? I have a fax machine. I have the post office. It works fine." Imagine trying to explain Amazon. "You can have any book you want delivered to your house in 2 days." They'd say, "Why? I can just go to the bookstore down the street." At the time, their skepticism made sense. The early internet was slow, clunky, and hard to use. But they weren't just missing the point about a new feature. They were missing the point about a fundamental shift in how information moves. They saw a clunky digital letter. They didn't see the global, interconnected world that would be built on top of that simple idea. That is exactly where we are with crypto in 2025. Most people see it as a new, volatile way to make or lose money. They see a digital stock market, but they are missing the fundamental shift. Crypto isn't just about a new way to handle money. It's about a new way to handle trust and control. To understand this, you only need to understand one core problem: centralization. It sounds like a complicated word, but it's something you deal with every single day. Think about your bank. If you want to send $100 to your friend, you don't just hand it to them through the internet. You have to ask your bank, a central authority, to please move the numbers in your account to your friend's account at their bank. The banks are the middlemen. They have all the power. They set the fees, they can take days to process the transaction, and if they want to, they can freeze your account for any reason. You are trusting them completely. Think about social media. When you post a photo on Instagram, you don't actually own it in a practical sense. Meta, the central authority, owns the platform. They control the algorithm that decides who sees your photo, and they own all the data associated with your account. They are the trusted middleman for your social life. This is the model our entire modern world is built on. Trusted central gatekeepers. Governments, banks, and big tech companies. For centuries, this was the only way to do things at scale. You needed a central source of truth to keep the ledger, enforce the rules, and make sure nobody cheated. But what if we didn't? What if technology could create a system where we don't have to trust a single company or a single government? What if we could build systems where trust is guaranteed not by a powerful middleman, but by mathematics and code that is open for everyone to see? That is the revolutionary question that cryptocurrency answers. It's a technology of decentralization. It's a way to remove the powerful middlemen and give control back to the edges of the network, back to the individuals, back to you. It's about being able to send value to anyone, anywhere without asking a bank for permission. It's about being able to own your digital identity and data without a tech giant monetizing it. It's about creating systems where the rules are transparent and can't be changed on a whim by a CEO or a government committee. This is a profoundly American idea in a way. It's about self-sovereignty, property rights, and freedom in a new digital frontier. Now, this is a huge world-changing idea, and it can still feel overwhelming. So, for the rest of this series, we're going to organize everything we learn into three main categories. Think of these as the three pillars of the crypto universe. Pillar number 1 is what I call digital gold. This is Bitcoin, the original, the one that started it all. The primary purpose of Bitcoin is to be a secure, decentralized store of value. It's a digital asset that no single person, company, or government can control, censor, or inflate away. For millions of people around the world, it's an alternative to their failing local currency or a way to protect their savings in a way that is seizure-resistant. It's not trying to be a fast payment system for buying coffee. It's trying to be the best form of savings the world has ever seen. It is the bedrock of this new financial system. Pillar number 2 is the world computer. This is primarily Ethereum and its main competitors. If Bitcoin is digital gold, a static, secure asset, then Ethereum is a dynamic, programmable platform. It took the core idea of a decentralized network and asked, what else can we do with this besides just sending value from A to B? The answer was something called smart contracts. These are just programs that run on the blockchain, executing automatically when certain conditions are met, without any middleman. This innovation transformed the industry. It's the foundation for decentralized finance, where you can lend, borrow, and trade without a bank. It's the basis for NFTs, which prove ownership of digital items. If Bitcoin is the digital equivalent of a gold bar, Ethereum and platforms like it are the digital equivalent of an entire financial system. The banks, the stock exchanges, the insurance companies, all running on open, transparent code. Pillar number 3 is the innovation lab. This is basically everything else. All the thousands of other cryptocurrencies, often called altcoins. This is the wild, experimental, and often chaotic frontier of the space. In this pillar, you have projects trying to rebuild everything from supply chain management and file storage to social media and video games on the blockchain. This is where you'll find incredible innovation, but it's also where you'll find the most risk and the most scams. It's the high-risk, high-reward territory where the next potential Google or Amazon of the decentralized world might be getting its start right now. Digital gold, the world computer, and the innovation lab. That's our framework. That's how we're going to navigate this new world together. We're not just learning about random coins. We're learning about the fundamental categories of innovation that are driving this revolution. So, to recap, this isn't about magic money. It's about a fundamental shift away from centralized trust towards decentralized verification. It's about technology that allows us to own our assets, our data, and our digital lives in a way we never could before. It's a movement grounded in code, mathematics, and the desire for a more open and fair system. Now that we understand the why, the grand vision, and the problem this technology is desperately trying to solve, we are ready to lay our first foundational stone. We're going to tackle the original, the king, the one that started this entire revolution. We are going to demystify Bitcoin. Not just what it is, but how it actually truly works, explained in such simple terms that you'll finally be able to explain it to anyone with total confidence. So let's start not with technology, but with a story. A story about a crisis. The year is 2008. The global financial system is on the brink of collapse. Banks that were considered too big to fail were, in fact, failing. Governments were printing trillions of dollars out of thin air to bail them out, devaluing the money in regular people's pockets. Trust in the very institutions that managed our money was shattered. It felt like the entire system was a house of cards, and a strong wind had just blown through. In the midst of this chaos, on a small, obscure cryptography mailing list, a paper was published. It was titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The author was a name nobody had ever heard of, Satoshi Nakamoto. To this day, no one knows if Satoshi was a man, a woman, or a group of brilliant developers. They were and remain a ghost. But this ghost left behind an idea so powerful it would spark a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Satoshi's idea was a radical answer to the failures of 2008. The core question was this: what if we could have a form of money that didn't rely on trust? What if we didn't need a bank, a credit card company, or a government to verify our transactions? What if we could send value directly from one person to another, anywhere in the world, as easily as sending an email without asking for anyone's permission? This is the promise of Bitcoin. It's not just internet money. It's a fundamental rethinking of how money works. So how did Satoshi solve this massive problem of trust? The answer is a technology called the blockchain. Now I know what you're thinking. Blockchain. It's a word that gets thrown around constantly, and it sounds incredibly complex. But the core concept is surprisingly simple. I want you to forget computers for a second. Imagine a giant, indestructible stone tablet. This tablet is public. It's sitting in the middle of a global town square where anyone, and I mean anyone, can see it. Every time someone wants to send money to someone else, let's say Alice wants to send Bob 1 coin, they announce it to the entire town. A trusted carver then takes a chisel and permanently carves that transaction onto the stone tablet for everyone to see. Alice gives Bob 1 coin. Once it's carved, it's there forever. You can't erase it. You can't scratch it out. You can't change it. If someone tried to sneak in at night and alter a carving, everyone would know the next morning because their copy of the tablet's history wouldn't match. The whole town would see the fraud instantly. This public, unchangeable stone tablet is the Bitcoin blockchain. It's a ledger, just like a bank's record book. But instead of being hidden away in a private bank server, it's public and distributed across thousands of computers all over the world. Every computer in the network has a copy of the entire tablet. This is the first piece of the puzzle. Decentralization. There is no central headquarters. No Bitcoin SEO. No single point of failure. It's a network run by its users for its users. Okay, but this raises a few questions, right? In our stone tablet analogy, who is the trusted carver? And how do we know it's really Alice who authorized the transaction? What stops me from shouting, "Alice gives me 1 coin," and trying to steal her money? This is where the genius of cryptography comes in. It's the crypto in cryptocurrency. Think of it like this. Everyone in this global town has 2 keys, a public key and a private key. Your public key is like your bank account number. You can share it with anyone. If someone wants to send you money, they send it to your public key address. It's public information. But your private key, that is a secret. It's a long, complex password that only you know. It's your digital signature. It's the only thing in the universe that can authorize a transaction from your account. When Alice wants to send Bob a coin, she uses her secret private key to sign the transaction. This signature is a unique cryptographic seal that proves without a shadow of a doubt that she, and only she, approved this payment. So when a transaction is announced, everyone in the network can use Alice's public key to check the signature and verify it's authentic. They can see that the order came from the true owner of the funds, without ever needing to know who Alice is or seeing her secret key. It's like having a signature that is impossible to forge. This solves the problem of fraudulent transactions. So now we have a public ledger and a way to verify who is sending money. But who gets to actually add the new transactions, the new carvings, to the stone tablet? If anyone could do it, it would be chaos. This is where miners come in. Miners are the decentralized carvers of the Bitcoin network. They are people and companies all around the world who connect powerful computers to the network. These computers are all competing to solve an incredibly difficult mathematical puzzle. It's like a global lottery that happens every 10 minutes. The first miner to solve the puzzle wins 2 things. First, they win the right to be the one who gathers up all the latest verified transactions, a block of them, and officially add them to the blockchain, our stone tablet. Second, and this is the crucial part, they get rewarded with a brand new, freshly created amount of Bitcoin. This is how new Bitcoin is born. It's their payment for doing the work of securing the network, of carving the transactions into stone. This process is called proof of work, and it's what makes the entire system secure. To change a past transaction, a hacker wouldn't just need to alter one block. They would have to go back and resolve the complex math puzzles for that block, and every single block that came after it, all while the rest of the world's miners are working on the current block. It would require an astronomical, almost impossible amount of computing power, more than all the other miners combined. It's like trying to outrun the entire world in a race that never stops. It's this security that makes the Bitcoin ledger effectively immutable, or unchangeable. So let's put it all together. Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency, meaning it's not controlled by any single company or government. It runs on a transparent public ledger called the blockchain, which is a record of every transaction ever made. Transactions are secured using powerful cryptography, so you can be sure they are authentic. and the network is maintained by miners, who are rewarded with new Bitcoin for their work in verifying transactions and securing the network. And here's the final mind-blowing piece of the puzzle that ties directly back to the 2008 crisis. Satoshi Nakamoto programmed a rule into Bitcoin's code. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Ever. Unlike traditional currencies, where governments can print more money whenever they want, potentially causing inflation and devaluing your savings, Bitcoin is designed to be scarce. It's predictable. It's transparent. This scarcity is what gives it properties similar to a digital version of gold. It's a feature, not a bug, designed to protect its value over the long term. So, Bitcoin isn't just code. It's a response. It's a system of money built on math instead of trust in politicians or bankers. It's an alternative financial network that is global, open to anyone, and operates 24/7 without permission. You now understand more about how Bitcoin truly works than 99% of the population. You understand the problem it was created to solve, and the elegant, powerful solution it presents. You get the stone tablet, the public and private keys, and the global competition of miners that keeps it all running. But Bitcoin, as revolutionary as it is, was just the beginning. It was the spark. After Satoshi released this idea into the world, other developers saw its potential and began to ask, what else could we do with this? What if we could build more than just a money system on a blockchain? What if we could create decentralized versions of, well, anything? The stock market? Social media? Voting systems? This explosion of creativity led to the birth of thousands of other cryptocurrencies, often called altcoins. And standing right behind Bitcoin, the undisputed number 2, is a project that took the idea of a blockchain and gave it superpowers. A project called Ethereum. And understanding Ethereum is the key to understanding the next evolution of this entire space, from NFTs to decentralized finance. It's where the story gets even wilder. So, if Bitcoin was a breakthrough, think of it like the invention of the world's first pocket calculator. It does one thing, and it does it with near-perfect security and reliability. It adds and subtracts value from a public ledger. It's a closed system designed for a single purpose, to be digital money. The creators of Ethereum looked at this and asked a revolutionary question. What if, instead of a pocket calculator, we could build a smartphone? A calculator is great, but you can't run Instagram on it. You can't order a pizza with it. You can't play a game on it. A smartphone, on the other hand, isn't just one thing. It's a platform. It's a foundation upon which millions of different applications can be built by anyone, anywhere in the world. That is the leap from Bitcoin to Ethereum. Ethereum took the core idea of a decentralized, secure blockchain and turned it into a global open-source computer. A computer that isn't owned by Google or Apple or any government. It's a computer run by a network of thousands of machines all over the world, and anyone can write and run applications on it. These applications, once launched, can't be shut down or censored by any single entity. But how do you run an app on a blockchain? You do it with something called a smart contract. And despite the fancy name, the concept is incredibly simple. You already understand it. Think of a vending machine. A vending machine is a dumb contract in the real world. The rules are programmed right into the machine. If you put in $2 and you press the button for a soda, then the machine will release that soda. There's no negotiation. There's no manager you have to ask for permission. The outcome is guaranteed by the machine's programming. A smart contract is just that, a digital vending machine. It's a piece of code that lives on the Ethereum blockchain. It's an agreement with the terms written directly into the code. If this happens, then do that. And because it runs on the blockchain, once it's set in motion, it's unstoppable and unchangeable. It executes automatically without needing a lawyer, a banker, or any other middleman to enforce it. The network is the enforcer. This is a seismic shift in how we think about trust. For all of human history, we've relied on intermediaries to manage our agreements, banks to handle our money, lawyers to write our contracts, governments to issue our deeds. Smart contracts allow us to replace that trusted middleman with trusted code. Now, you might be thinking, okay, a global computer is cool, but computers need power. What makes this thing run? Just like you need to pay for electricity to power your computer at home, you need to pay a small fee to run an application or execute a smart contract on the Ethereum network. This computational effort is called gas. It's the fuel for the Ethereum world computer. And how do you pay for this gas? You pay for it using Ethereum's own native cryptocurrency, called Ether, or ETH for short. This is a critical distinction that trips a lot of people up. Ethereum is the network, the global smartphone. Ether, ETH, is the currency you use to pay for things on that network, like the gas fees for running your apps. So when you hear someone say they're buying Ethereum, what they're really buying is Ether, the digital fuel that makes the whole system work. The more people want to use the apps on Ethereum, the more they need Ether to pay for gas, which in turn drives demand for the currency itself. So we have this global computer, powered by Ether, that can run unstoppable smart contracts. What did people start building with this incredible new technology? The first things they built were called dApps, which is short for decentralized applications. They look and feel just like the apps on your phone, but the backend, the part you don't see, runs on the blockchain instead of on a server owned by a company like Amazon or Microsoft. And the first two killer use cases for these dApps were things that almost nobody saw coming. They were NFTs and decentralized finance, or DeFi. Let's start with NFTs because they absolutely took the world by storm. The term stands for non-fungible token. I know it sounds like technical jargon, but again, the idea is simple. Fungible just means interchangeable. A dollar bill is fungible. If you and I both have a $1 bill, we can swap them and nothing changes. We both still have $1. They're identical in value. Non-fungible means unique, one of a kind. The Mona Lisa is non-fungible. Your house is non-fungible. There can be other houses, but there is only one specific house at your address. You can't swap it for your neighbors and have the exact same thing. So, a non-fungible token, or NFT, is simply a unique digital token. It's a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain that acts as a public, verifiable certificate of ownership for an asset. Think of it as a digital deed. And the first thing people applied this to was digital art and collectibles. This solved a problem that had existed since the dawn of the internet. How do you prove you own a digital file? Before NFTs, you couldn't. Anyone could right-click and save a copy of an image, and their copy was identical to the original. The NFT doesn't stop you from right-clicking and saving the image. Just like you can take a picture of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, you can save a copy of a digital artwork. But you don't own the original. The NFT is the proof, recorded on the immutable blockchain, that you are the true owner of the original piece. It created digital scarcity and verifiable ownership for the first time in history, sparking a multi-billion-dollar revolution in art, gaming, music, and more. That was the first explosion. The second was even bigger, and it's called DeFi, or decentralized finance. The creators of DeFi asked a simple question. What if we could rebuild the entire traditional financial system, banks, loans, stock markets, insurance, but do it with open, transparent smart contracts on Ethereum? Instead of going to a bank to get a loan, you could interact with a DeFi application, a protocol that is just a smart contract. You deposit your crypto as collateral, and the smart contract automatically lends you money. The interest rates are set by code, based on supply and demand, not by a committee in a boardroom. You can earn interest on your savings that's often far higher than a traditional bank, because there are no giant office buildings or CEO salaries to pay for. It's just efficient code. You can trade assets 24/7 without a stock market that closes on weekends. DeFi created a parallel financial system that is global, open to anyone with an internet connection, and operates entirely on transparent rules that no single person can change on a whim. It was like going from a world of private, secretive bank ledgers to a global open financial machine that anyone could plug into and use. So let's just pause and absorb this leap. In a few short years, we went from Bitcoin, a brilliant but single-purpose digital money, to Ethereum, a programmable world computer. This computer gave birth to smart contracts, which in turn enabled the creation of unique digital assets with NFTs, and a completely new, open-source financial system with DeFi. This new world was built on a promise of unstoppable code that was law. But this incredible power also created an incredible risk. What happens when that unstoppable code has a flaw? What happens when a hacker finds a loophole in a digital vending machine that holds hundreds of millions of dollars? This new world computer was supposed to be unchangeable. But in its early days, one catastrophic event forced its creators to do the one thing they swore they would never do: rewrite history. And that single decision would split the entire network and its community right in two. This is the story of Ethereum. And the moment its utopian dream collided with a very harsh reality. The year was 2016. Ethereum was young, bursting with potential. Its creators had built something revolutionary: a world computer that could run smart contracts. These weren't just for sending money, they were bits of code that could execute automatically without a middleman. Imagine a vending machine, but for anything: a loan, a bet, an insurance policy. You put in the required crypto and the code guarantees you get what you paid for. No lawyers, no bankers, just pure unstoppable code. And at the heart of this excitement was a project so ambitious, so radical, it captured the imagination of the entire crypto world. It was called the DAO. The DAO stood for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and it was exactly what it sounds like. The goal was to create a venture capital fund with no CEO, no board of directors, and no central office. It would be an organization that lived entirely on the Ethereum blockchain, governed by thousands of anonymous investors from around the world. Anyone could pitch a project to the DAO, and the token holders, the people who invested, would vote on which ideas to fund. If a project was successful, the profits would flow back to the DAO and be shared among all the token holders. It was the ultimate expression of decentralization, a leaderless company, run by the wisdom of the crowd, powered by unstoppable code. The hype was unreal. It was billed as the future of human organization itself, and people bought in hard. In just 28 days, the DAO raised over $150 million worth of Ether, the native currency of Ethereum. At the time, that was more than 14% of all Ether in existence. It was the largest crowdfunding campaign in history, and it made the DAO a giant glittering treasure chest sitting right in the middle of this new digital world. But here's the thing about treasure chests. They attract pirates. And in the world of code, the pirates aren't swashbuckling buccaneers. They are silent, meticulous hackers who look for a single tiny crack in the armor. The DAO was built on thousands of lines of complex code. And somewhere buried deep inside that code was a fatal flaw. To understand what happened, you don't need to be a coder. Just think about it like this. Imagine a special kind of bank account. This account has a rule. When you ask to withdraw your money, it does two things in order. First, it gives you your cash. Second, it updates its ledger to show that you've been paid. Hand over the cash, then update the books. Seems fine, right? But what if you were a magician? What if, in that tiny split second between the bank handing you the cash and the clerk writing it down in the book, you could shout, "Hey, I'd like to withdraw my money." The clerk, looking at his book, would see that your account is still full. He hasn't marked it down yet. So, he gives you the cash again, and again, and again. You could keep doing this, draining the account over and over, all before the poor clerk has a chance to make a single mark in his ledger. You aren't breaking into the vault. You're not holding anyone up. You are, technically, just following the bank's own flawed rules. This is a simplified version of what's called a re-entrancy attack. And it's exactly what an anonymous attacker did to the DAO. On June 17, 2016, the community watched in collective horror. On the public blockchain, for all to see, someone was using this exact trick to drain the DAO, siphoning out millions of dollars worth of Ether transaction by transaction. They were powerless to stop it. The code was the law, and the attacker was simply executing the code as it was written. The very thing that was supposed to be Ethereum's greatest strength, its unstoppable, unchangeable nature, had become its greatest weakness. The heist was slow, methodical, and completely devastating. By the time it was over, the attacker had drained a third of the DAO's funds, worth about $50 million at the time. The entire Ethereum project, the second biggest thing in crypto, was on the verge of collapse. Faith was shattered. The price of Ether plummeted. But there was one small saving grace. Due to the way the DAO's code was written, the stolen funds were locked in a sort of holding account for 28 days. The community had a window, a few weeks to figure out what to do. And this sparked one of the most ferocious and important debates in the history of technology. It was a philosophical civil war that split the community into two fiercely passionate camps. In one camp were the purists, the idealists. Their mantra was simple and absolute. Code is law. The blockchain, they argued, is meant to be immutable, unchangeable. That is its entire purpose. You cannot go back and rewrite history no matter how much you don't like the outcome. Yes, the hack was a disaster. Yes, a thief was getting away with millions. But changing the ledger to fix it would be a far greater crime. It would prove that Ethereum wasn't truly decentralized or censorship resistant. It would mean that a group of influential developers like Ethereum's creator Vitalik Buterin could act like a central bank, a government, and just reverse transactions they didn't like. This would betray the entire principle they were fighting for. They believed the loss, however painful, was the price of staying true to the vision. In the other camp were the pragmatists. They were led by Vitalik and the Ethereum Foundation. Their argument was one of common sense and survival. They said, code is law is a beautiful ideal, but it can't be an excuse for letting a catastrophic crime stand. The attacker exploited a bug. They didn't follow the spirit of the rules. Letting them get away with it would not only reward theft but would also destroy all trust in the Ethereum platform forever. Who would build on a network where a single coding error could lead to an irreversible multi-million-dollar disaster with no recourse? To them, saving the community and the future of the project was more important than clinging to a rigid ideology that would lead to its ruin. The pragmatists proposed a solution. It was a digital version of a nuclear option: a hard fork. A hard fork is a radical upgrade to a blockchain software. It's not just a patch. It's a fundamental change to the rules of the game. Once the new rules are implemented, they are no longer compatible with the old rules. Think of it like changing the rules of chess so that pawns can now move backward. Everyone who wants to keep playing has to agree to this new rulebook. If you try to play by the old rules, your moves will be rejected by everyone else playing the new game. You're effectively on your own. The proposed hard fork for Ethereum would do one thing. It would add a small piece of code that would essentially move all the money from the DAO, including the stolen funds, into a new smart contract where the original investors could get their money back. It was a do-over, a rewind button for one specific, catastrophic event. The decision was put to a vote among the Ethereum community. The miners, the developers, the exchanges, the users, everyone had a say. And the result was overwhelming. The vast majority voted in favor of the hard fork. They chose to intervene. They chose to rewrite that one small piece of history to correct what they saw as a devastating injustice. And so, at block number 1,920,000, the fork happened. The Ethereum network upgraded to the new rules. The funds were recovered. The community breathed a massive sigh of relief. The new altered chain carried on, and it is the blockchain we know today simply as Ethereum, the home of the cryptocurrency ETH. But the story doesn't end there. Because what about the purists? What about that small, defiant minority who believed that code is law, was a sacred principle that could never be broken? They refused to upgrade. They saw the hard fork as a bailout, a betrayal of the core tenets of decentralization. So they kept running the old software. They kept mining the original unaltered chain, the one where the hack still happened, and the stolen funds were still in the attacker's wallet. And because enough people kept supporting it, that original chain did not die. It survived. It continued on, a parallel universe, a ghost of the past that refused to be erased. This original unaltered blockchain became known as Ethereum Classic with its own coin ETC. This was the moment the world learned a critical lesson about decentralized networks. If a community disagrees strongly enough, it can literally split reality in two. The DAO hack wasn't just a heist. It was a crucible that forged two different blockchains, each with its own distinct philosophy about how the world should work. One that believes in pragmatic intervention, and one that believes in absolute, unyielding immutability. This single event forced everyone in the space to confront the messy human reality behind the elegant perfection of code. It taught a brutal lesson in security, showing that even the smallest bug in a smart contract could have million-dollar consequences. But ironically, by nearly destroying Ethereum, the DAO hack also set the stage for its most explosive period of growth. It forced developers to become smarter, more careful, and it opened the floodgates for a new, even crazier idea. What if anyone, not just a massive project like the DAO, could raise millions of dollars by creating their own token on Ethereum? The Wild West was about to begin. This new idea was called an initial coin offering, or an ICO, and it was pure, unregulated digital dynamite. Think of it like an IPO where a company sells stock to the public for the first time. But imagine if instead of needing Wall Street banks, mountains of paperwork, and approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission, all you needed was a 20-page PDF and a website. That was the ICO. The magic ingredient that made this all possible was a technical standard on Ethereum called ERC20. Now that sounds complicated, but the concept is brilliantly simple. Think of it like a recipe. Before ERC20, if you wanted to create a new digital token, you had to be a genius coder. You had to invent everything from scratch: how it's created, how it's sent, how it's tracked. It was like trying to bake a cake without knowing what flour, sugar, or eggs even are. ERC20 was the universal recipe for a basic token. It provided a simple, standardized list of functions that every token needed to have. A function for its total supply, a function to check someone's balance, a function to send the token from one person to another. By following this recipe, anyone with a basic understanding of Ethereum's coding language could create their own brand new, fully functional cryptocurrency token in a matter of hours. It was like going from having to build a car from raw metal to being able to assemble one from a kit. and suddenly everybody wanted to build a car. The year 2017 is when the dam broke. It started as a trickle and then became a tidal wave. Every single day, new projects were popping up. They would publish a document called a white paper, which was supposed to be a detailed plan for their project. In reality, many of them were just vague marketing documents, filled with buzzwords like decentralization, paradigm shifting, and synergy, promising to revolutionize everything from dental records to banana shipping using the blockchain. And people bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. The process was insane. A project would announce their ICO. They'd post an Ethereum address online. And at a specific time, a global digital gold rush would begin. People from all over the world would send their Ether to this address. And in return, the project's smart contract would automatically send them back a corresponding amount of their brand new, never-before-seen token. We're not talking about small amounts of money. A project with nothing more than a slick website and a fancy PDF could raise $5 million, $10 million, $20 million. One project, called Bancor, raised $153 million in less than 3 hours. Another, called Filecoin, raised over $250 million. The fear of missing out, the FOMO, was a palpable force. Your friend's cousin's roommate put $1,000 into some random pet food on the blockchain coin, and a week later, it was worth $50,000. Stories like this, both real and exaggerated, were everywhere. It felt like a lottery where everyone was winning. The price of Ethereum itself skyrocketed from under $10 at the start of the year to over $700 by the end, precisely because you needed Ether to participate in all of these ICOs. It was a feedback loop of pure mania. New ICOs drove up the price of Ether, which brought more attention to crypto, which led to more people wanting to buy into ICOs. Celebrities got in on the action. Boxer Floyd Mayweather and music producer DJ Khaled were posting on social media, promoting different ICOs to their millions of followers. The message was clear: get in now or regret it forever. But beneath the surface of this gold rush, there was a deep, dark problem. The vast majority of these projects had no product, no company, no revenue. Many didn't even have a functioning team. They were just ideas. And in many cases, they were bad ideas. Worse yet, many were outright scams. Because it was so easy to create a token and raise millions with total anonymity, con artists had a field day. They would create a professional-looking website, write a convincing white paper, raise a fortune, and then simply disappear, deleting the website and vanishing with the ether. This was called an exit scam, and it happened constantly. For every legitimate project trying to build something real, there were 100 others that were either incompetent, delusional, or criminal. But in the frenzy of 2017, nobody seemed to care. No one was doing their homework. The only question was, how quickly can I get in and how high will it go? It was a house of cards built on hype, and in early 2018, the wind began to blow. The first gust came from regulators. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, started making it very clear that they viewed most of these ICO tokens as illegal, unregistered securities. They started launching investigations and shutting down fraudulent offerings. This sent a chill through the market. Then the early investors, the ones who had bought in for pennies, started to cash out their millions. They began selling their new tokens for Ether, and then selling that Ether for US dollars. The constant downward pressure on prices began to build. And then the public realized something that should have been obvious all along. A white paper is not a business. Promise is not a product. The vast majority of these revolutionary projects had produced absolutely nothing. They had taken millions of dollars from the public and had nothing to show for it. The emperor had no clothes. What followed was a brutal, prolonged crash. It's often called the crypto winter. Over the course of 2018, the market was decimated. Bitcoin fell over 80% from its peak. Ethereum, the engine of the ICO boom, fell over 94%. And those thousands of ICO tokens? They were an extinction-level event. Almost all of them fell 99% or more. Many went to zero, their websites abandoned, their communities gone. The dreams of overnight riches evaporated, leaving behind a trail of catastrophic financial losses for ordinary people who had bet their savings on a digital pipe dream. The Wild West was over. The party had ended in a spectacular, system-wide hangover. It was easy to look at the wreckage and declare the entire experiment of crypto and smart contracts a failure. Scam. A fad that had finally deservedly died. But that wasn't the whole story. Because buried in the rubble of the ICO bubble, something incredibly important had been proven. First, the technology worked. The ERC-20 standard was a monumental success. It showed that you could create, issue, and trade digital assets on a global decentralized platform like Ethereum at scale. The infrastructure had been stress-tested by billions of dollars and millions of users in a trial by fire. Second, the crash taught the entire industry a painful, but vital lesson in maturity. The community learned that hype and speculation were not enough. A project needed a real use case, a dedicated team, and a sustainable plan. The era of "trust me, this is a good idea" was over. The era of "show me the code, show me the product" had begun. And most importantly, a handful of those ICO projects didn't die. The ones that had been quietly building, the ones with legitimate teams and real vision, they survived the winter. They kept their heads down, ignored the price collapse, and just kept working. They were the battle-hardened survivors of the crypto apocalypse. The ICO bubble had popped, leaving a graveyard of dead coins. But in the ruins, these survivors looked at the tools that had been built, the ERC-20 standard, the smart contracts, the decentralized exchanges, and they started to see them not just as a way to raise money but as building blocks. Digital money Legos. And with these Legos, they were about to build something far more ambitious, far more disruptive than just a new way to fund a startup. They were about to build an entirely new financial system from the ground up, one without any banks at all. And it was about to change everything again. This new financial system wasn't about asking for permission. It was about writing it in code. To understand the earthquake that was about to happen, you first have to ask a very simple question. What is a bank? Forget the marble columns and the teller windows. A bank really only does a few things. It holds your money. It lends out money to others. And it helps you exchange one asset for another, like swapping dollars for euros. For centuries, we've needed these massive trusted institutions to do these simple things. We needed them to keep the ledger, to approve the loan, to be the middleman. We paid them handsomely for the privilege, with fees, with slow wire transfers, with a system that locks out billions of people around the world. The creators on Ethereum looked at this and asked a revolutionary question. What if we don't need the bank? What if we could replace the banker, the loan officer, and the stockbroker with a few hundred lines of code? Code that was open for anyone to see, that ran exactly as written 24/7, with no holidays, no biases, and no CEO who could change the rules. This was the birth of decentralized finance. DeFi. Think about it like this. In the old world, finance is a series of walled gardens. Your Bank of America account can't talk directly to your Fidelity brokerage account, which can't talk directly to your cousin's bank in Mexico. Each step requires a gatekeeper, a permission slip, a fee. It's slow, it's clunky, and it's expensive. DeFi's goal was to tear down all the walls and build a single open financial playground in their place. And the playground was being built on Ethereum. The first building block was already there, your own wallet. As we discussed, a wallet like MetaMask isn't just a place to hold crypto. It's your new financial identity. It's your bank account, your brokerage account, and your login, all rolled into one, controlled only by you. But a bank account isn't very useful if you can't do anything with the money. So, the next step was to rebuild the stock exchange. In the old world, if you want to trade Apple stock for Google stock, you go through a centralized exchange like the Nasdaq. They have something called an order book. Buyers post the price they're willing to pay, sellers post the price they're willing to accept, and the exchange matches them up. It's a complex, centralized dance. The early crypto builders tried to copy this, but it was slow and expensive on a blockchain. Then, a developer named Hayden Adams had a breakthrough idea. It was an idea so simple and so powerful it would become the engine of DeFi. It was called Uniswap. Uniswap threw out the entire idea of an order book. Instead, it used something called an automated market maker. Now that sounds complicated, but the concept is beautiful. Imagine a simple pool with two things in it. A huge pile of Ethereum and a huge pile of another token, let's call it a stablecoin. If you want to trade your Ethereum for the stablecoin, you just throw your ETH into the pool, and the smart contract automatically spits out the correct amount of stablecoins based on a simple math formula. The more ETH you throw in, the more the price of ETH in the pool goes down for the next person. The more you take out, the more the price goes up. You're not trading with another person. You're trading with the pool of money itself. The code is the market. This was a tectonic shift. Suddenly, you didn't need a billion-dollar company like Coinbase or Binance to make a market. Anyone, anywhere in the world could create a pool for any two tokens they wanted, instantly creating a market for it. It was permissionless. It was global. And it was unstoppable. You could now swap assets from your own wallet in seconds, without ever giving up custody of your funds to a third party. The first pillar of the old financial world, the exchange, had been rebuilt as code. But what about the other pillar? Lending and borrowing. How do you get a loan in a world with no banks and no credit scores? The answer was another ingenious DeFi concept: over-collateralized lending. Protocols like Compound and Aave emerged. Here's how they worked. Let's say you own $10,000 worth of Ethereum. You believe it's going to go up in value, so you don't want to sell it. But you need $5,000 in cash right now to fix your roof. In the old world, you'd go to a bank, fill out a mountain of paperwork, and hope they approve your loan. In DeFi, you go to a lending protocol. You deposit your $10,000 of Ethereum into their smart contract as collateral. The code then allows you to instantly borrow, say, $5,000 worth of a stable coin against it. No credit check, no paperwork, no questions asked. The code doesn't care who you are, only that you've put up more value than you're taking out. You can then take that stable coin, send it to an exchange, and cash it out for real US dollars. You fix your roof. Later, when you're ready, you pay back the $5,000 loan plus a little bit of interest, and the smart contract automatically unlocks your original $10,000 of Ethereum for you. But here's the other side of the coin, the part that truly makes you the bank. Where does that borrowed money come from? Comes from other users. People from all over the world can deposit their own stablecoins or other crypto into the protocol to provide liquidity for borrowers. In return, they earn a share of the interest that borrowers like you are paying. They are earning yield on their assets completely passively by letting a smart contract do all the work of a bank. The second pillar, lending, was now also just code. This is where the real magic begins. Because these protocols were all built on the same public blockchain, Ethereum, they could all talk to each other. They were like Lego bricks. Uniswap was one Lego. Aave was another. Stablecoins were a third type of Lego. And because they were all open source, you could start snapping them together in ways no one had ever imagined. This concept is called composability, and it's what makes DeFi a living, breathing ecosystem. You could, for example, take out a loan on Aave, swap those borrowed funds for another token on Uniswap, and then deposit that new token into a different protocol to earn even more yield, all in a single complex transaction. People started calling them money Legos. They were building entire financial strategies, layer by layer, brick by brick, creating things that were simply impossible in the walled garden world of traditional finance. You can't just plug your Chase bank account directly into the back end of the New York Stock Exchange and have it automatically execute a strategy for you. In DeFi, you could. This realization ignited a fire. The summer of 2020 became known as DeFi Summer. It was a Cambrian explosion of financial innovation. Billions of dollars poured into these protocols as people chased astronomical yields. New bizarre experiments were launching every single day. It was chaotic, it was brilliant, and it felt like witnessing the birth of a new internet, but for money. This wasn't just about recreating the old system anymore. This was about building something fundamentally new, an open, programmable, and global financial layer for the entire world. But this new financial skyscraper was being built at a dizzying speed by anonymous developers, with code that was brand new and barely tested. And when you build with Legos, there's always a risk. What happens if one of the bricks has a crack in it? What happens when the entire tower, holding billions of dollars of people's money, starts to wobble? The answer is it collapses. And when a $40 billion tower collapses, it doesn't just fall over. It implodes, taking everything and everyone with it in a cloud of dust and shattered dreams. This isn't a hypothetical. This is the story of one of the most ambitious, most celebrated, and most catastrophic failures in the history of crypto: the fall of Terra Luna. To understand what happened, you have to understand the tower they were building. It was magnificent. At its base was a new blockchain called Terra. And on top of that, they built two special kinds of Lego bricks. The first was called Luna. Think of Luna as the construction company's stock. Its value could go up or down based on how well the company was doing. The second and most important brick was called Terra USD or UST. UST was the magic trick. It was designed to be a stable coin, a crypto token that was always, and I mean always, worth exactly $1. But unlike other stablecoins we've talked about, which are backed by actual dollars sitting in a real bank account somewhere, UST was different. It was an algorithmic stablecoin. It wasn't backed by dollars, it was backed by a promise. It was backed by code. The mechanism was clever, at least on paper. The system created a permanent deal. You could always, no matter what, trade $1 worth of Luna for one UST token. And you could always trade one UST token for $1 worth of Luna. This created an arbitrage opportunity for traders. If the price of UST ever dropped to, say, 99 cents, A trader could buy up that cheap UST and immediately trade it in the system for a full dollar's worth of Luna, pocketing a 1-cent profit on every token. This buying pressure was supposed to push the price of UST back up to $1. Conversely, if UST ever went up to $1.01, traders could buy $1 worth of Luna, trade it for 1 UST, and then sell that UST on the open market for a profit. This selling pressure would push the price back down to $1. The Luna token was designed to absorb all the volatility. It was the shock absorber for the entire system, expanding and contracting its supply to keep UST perfectly stable. It was a beautiful, intricate machine, a financial perpetual motion device. The Lego tower was not only standing, it was soaring, reaching for the clouds. But a tower needs a reason to exist. Why would anyone want to hold this new experimental stablecoin UST instead of one backed by cold, hard cash? The builders had an answer for that too. And this answer was the crack in the foundation. They created a DeFi bank called the Anchor Protocol. An Anchor made a simple, almost unbelievable offer. Deposit your UST here, and we will pay you nearly 20% interest per year. 20%. At a time when your local bank was offering you maybe 0.1%, this seemed like a gift from the heavens. Money poured in from all over the world. People took out mortgages, emptied their retirement accounts, and went all in on what they were told was a stable and safe high-yield savings account. The demand for UST exploded. To get that 20% yield, you had to first buy UST. And to create more UST, the system had to burn or destroy the Luna token. This made the existing Luna supply more scarce, which sent its price to the moon. In early 2022, the Luna token was one of the top 10 cryptocurrencies in the world, and the total value of the Terra ecosystem peaked at over $40 billion. The builders were hailed as geniuses. They were on the cover of magazines. They had, it seemed, solved the puzzle. But a critical question was being ignored, drowned out by the roar of the bull market. Where was that 20% interest coming from? It wasn't coming from sustainable lending or real-world investments. It was being paid for out of the project's own treasury, a war chest of venture capital funding. They were literally just paying people to use their product. It was a marketing gimmick, but one that propped up a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem. It was a ticking time bomb. The entire $40 billion tower was balanced on this one unsustainable promise. And in May of 2022, the timer hit zero. We still don't know if it was a coordinated attack or just a natural sequence of events, but it doesn't matter. A few very large players, sometimes called whales, decided to cash out. They started selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of UST on the open market. This huge sell order pushed the price of UST down, first to 99 cents, then 98 cents. The wobble had begun. Normally, the arbitrage traders would swoop in, buy the cheap UST, and trade it for Luna, bringing the price back to $1. But the selling pressure was too immense. It was a tidal wave. For the first time, the system couldn't handle the volume. Panic started to set in. People logged into their Anchor accounts and saw their stable savings were no longer stable. They rushed for the exits all at once. Everyone started selling their UST. This is where the machine went into reverse. This is where the death spiral began. Remember the promise. You can always trade 1 UST for $1 worth of Luna. As billions of UST came flooding back into the system, the algorithm had to keep its promise. It began printing Luna tokens at an astronomical rate to meet the demand. It was printing millions, then billions, then eventually trillions of new Luna tokens. Think about basic economics. When you print trillions of new dollars, the value of each dollar goes down. The same thing happened to Luna. The hyperinflation of its supply caused its price to plummet. It dropped 50% in a day, then 90%, then 99%. And here's the fatal flaw. The stability of the UST stablecoin was based on people's faith in the value of the Luna token. When Luna's value crashed, all faith was lost. It was like discovering the foundation of your skyscraper was made of sand. The arbitrage mechanism broke entirely. No one wanted to trade their UST for a Luna token that was rapidly becoming worthless. The death spiral accelerated. The more UST people sold, the more Luna was printed. The more Luna was printed, the more its price crashed. The more Luna's price crashed, the more people panicked and sold their UST. Within 72 hours, it was over. Luna, which had been worth over $100 a token just weeks earlier, fell to a fraction of a penny. And UST, the stablecoin, collapsed to less than 10 cents, never to recover. $40 billion of value was wiped from the market. It was one of the single largest, fastest wealth destructions in modern history. The fallout was brutal. People around the world who believed their money was in a safe savings account lost everything. Life savings gone. College funds gone. Retirements gone. The human cost was immeasurable. A devastating reminder that behind the charts and the jargon are real people with real lives. The collapse of Terra Luna was more than just a failed project. It was a lesson written in blood and fire. It taught the entire industry about the inherent fragility of algorithmic stablecoins. It proved that code is not infallible and that financial models that look perfect on a whiteboard can shatter on contact with the real world's fear and greed. It showed us that if a return seems too good to be true, you have to ask where the yield is coming from. Because if you can't find the source, then you are the source. The Terra Tower didn't just fall. It sent a seismic shockwave across the entire crypto landscape, cracking the foundations of dozens of other companies that had foolishly built their own businesses on top of Terra's unstable ground. The contagion was just beginning, and what nobody knew at the time was that some of the biggest and most trusted names in the industry were about to follow Terra into the abyss. The financial world has a saying: when the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming naked. In May of 2022, the Terra Luna collapse wasn't just the tide going out, it was a tsunami receding, and the entire beach was suddenly shockingly bare. The problem was leverage. Imagine a chain of dominoes, but instead of little plastic rectangles, they're billion-dollar companies. And instead of a gentle tap, Do Kwon had just kicked the table with a steel-toed boot. The first major domino to wobble was a company called Celsius Network. If you were in crypto back then, you couldn't escape Celsius. Their CEO, Alex Mashinsky, was a charismatic, booming personality. He was on YouTube every week for hours-long Ask Mashinsky Anything sessions, wearing a t-shirt that said, "Banks are not your friends." His pitch was intoxicatingly simple. Unbank yourself. Give us your crypto, your Bitcoin, your Ethereum, and we'll give you a yield, a return on your assets that traditional banks could only dream of. We're talking 8, 10, even 17%. He claimed it was safe. He claimed Celsius was safer than a bank. He told his 1.7 million customers, his Celsians, that he was fighting for the little guy against the greedy Wall Street fat cats. People believed him. They put their life savings into Celsius, their retirement funds, their kids' college tuition. They trusted him. But behind the curtain, Celsius wasn't a bank. It was a high-risk, unregulated shadow hedge fund. To generate those incredible yields, Mashinsky and his team were taking their customers' deposits and gambling with them in the riskiest corners of decentralized finance. They were lending out massive sums to other firms with little to no collateral. And of course, they were one of the biggest players in the Anchor protocol on Terra. They had poured hundreds of millions of dollars of customer funds into that 20% stable yield. When Terra collapsed, Celsius took a direct, catastrophic hit. Suddenly, the easy money machine stopped. The yields they had promised were impossible to generate anymore. As fear gripped the market, customers started pulling their money out. A slow, steady bank run began to form. For weeks, Mashinsky kept up the charade. He went on Twitter Spaces, he did his AMAs, and he told everyone, "Don't worry. Celsius has the funds. We have more than we owe." He called the fears FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. He accused critics of being paid shills for the big banks. He looked into the camera and lied. Then, on the evening of June 12, 2022, the music stopped. An email went out to all 1.7 million users. Due to extreme market conditions, Celsius was pausing all withdrawals, all swaps, and all transfers. The gates were locked. The money was gone. In an instant, billions of dollars belonging to regular people were trapped inside a black box, their fate completely unknown. The slogan "Unbank yourself" had become a cruel, ironic joke. By giving their crypto to Celsius, they hadn't escaped the banks. They had given up the single most important feature of Bitcoin, self-custody. They had forgotten the cardinal rule. Not your keys, not your coins. And now they were about to learn that lesson in the most brutal way imaginable. The Celsius freeze sent a shockwave of panic through the industry, but they weren't the only ones swimming naked. Another, even more legendary firm was already taking on water. They were called Three Arrows Capital, or 3AC. Founded by Su Zhu and Kyle Davies, 3AC wasn't a company for the little guy. They were the titans, the whales, the guys who moved markets. Su Zhu, in particular, was a crypto celebrity, famous for his supercycle thesis, the idea that crypto had matured and would no longer experience devastating bear markets. He believed it was only up from here. They were seen as the smartest guys in the room, two brilliant traders who had built a $10 billion empire from nothing. Their influence was so immense that projects would brag about 3AC being an investor. It was the ultimate stamp of approval. But their genius was matched only by their arrogance. They believed they were invincible. They took on staggering amounts of leverage, borrowed money from nearly every major lender in the crypto space. They'd borrow from one company, use it as collateral to borrow even more from another, and so on, creating a daisy chain of debt and risk that snaked through the entire industry. And they made a series of massive, concentrated bets. Their biggest bet of all? Terra Luna. Su Zhu was one of its most vocal supporters. He wasn't just invested. He was a true believer. He had a public $1 million bet that Luna's price would be higher in a year. When Luna went to zero, 3 Arrows' capital was vaporized. They lost everything. Their entire $10 billion fund was wiped out in a matter of days. But here's the thing about borrowing $100 from someone. It's your problem. When you borrow $1 billion, it becomes their problem. And 3AC owed everyone. When the margin calls came, when their lenders demanded their money back, Su Zhu and Kyle Davies did the unthinkable. They went dark. They ghosted the entire industry. Phone calls went unanswered. Emails bounced. They abandoned their Singapore office and simply disappeared. This was the moment the contagion truly spiraled out of control. Think about it. Celsius was a lender. They had lent a huge sum of money to 3 Arrows Capital. That money was now gone. Another crypto lender, Voyager Digital, had lent 3AC over $650 million. That money was gone. A lender called BlockFi had lent them $1 billion. Gone. All these companies, which had also promised their own customers safe returns, were now staring at colossal holes in their balance sheets. The failure of one firm, 3AC, was now dragging everyone else down with it. Voyager soon followed Celsius and froze withdrawals, eventually declaring bankruptcy. BlockFi was teetering on the edge. The dominoes were falling faster and faster, and nobody knew where the chain reaction would end. The summer of 2022 was a bloodbath. It felt like the sky was falling. Trust was shattered. Life savings were being wiped out. Every day brought news of another company insolvent, another hack, another bankruptcy. The dream of a new decentralized financial system was turning into a nightmare of interconnected greed and failure. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, one figure seemed to rise above it all. One company appeared to be the only responsible adult in the room. While everyone else was going bankrupt, they were the ones writing the checks, bailing out the failing firms, and acting as the lender of last resort. They were seen as the industry's white knight. It's JP Morgan, stopping the panic and saving the entire space from total collapse. The company was a massive exchange called FTX. And its leader, a young, brilliant billionaire in a t-shirt and cargo shorts, was being hailed as a hero. His name was Sam Bankman-Fried. And what no one could possibly imagine at the time was that this savior, this pillar of stability, was presiding over a fraud so vast, so complete, that it would make all the other failures look like a rounding error. The real crisis hadn't even started yet. The date was November 2nd, 2022. It started not with a bang, but with a leak. An article published by the crypto news outlet CoinDesk got its hands on a private balance sheet. It wasn't FTX's balance sheet, but that of its sister company, the trading firm Alameda Research. What it revealed was the financial equivalent of finding out the foundation of a skyscraper is made of styrofoam. You see, a healthy company has a diverse set of assets: cash, bonds, real estate, investments in other companies. But Alameda's balance sheet was shockingly lopsided. A huge portion of its assets, billions of dollars, consisted of one thing: FTT. What is FTT? It's the crypto token created out of thin air by FTX itself. Think of it like a casino creating its own poker chips. The casino says each chip is worth $1, and as long as everyone agrees, it works. But what happens if the casino's biggest asset is just a giant pile of its own chips? FTX was creating the chips, giving them to its sister company Alameda, and Alameda was then using those chips as collateral to borrow billions of real dollars from other lenders. It was a completely circular, self-referential system. The value of FTX, Alameda, and their founder Sam Bankman-Fried was all built on a token that they themselves had invented and controlled. If the price of that token ever fell, the entire house of cards would collapse. And for a while nobody seemed to care. The market was booming, SBF was the genius on the cover of magazines, and everyone was making too much money to ask hard questions. But the CoinDesk article was a lit match dropped into a warehouse full of gasoline. At first, it was just a murmur in the crypto community. A few smart traders saw the report and quietly started selling their FTT, pulling their money off the FTX exchange. But then, for days later, the murmur became a roar. The CEO of the world's largest crypto exchange, Binance, a man named Changpeng Zhao, or CZ, went on Twitter. CZ and SBF were bitter rivals. They were the two titans of the industry, constantly battling for market share, for influence, for the crypto throne. And CZ announced to his millions of followers that due to the recent revelations, Binance would be liquidating its entire position in the FTT token, a position worth over $500 million. This was not just a business decision, it was a public execution. It was the ultimate vote of no confidence from the most powerful person in the industry. It was CZ looking at SBF's empire and telling the entire world, "I think this thing is worthless." The panic was instantaneous. If the CEO of Binance was selling, what did he know that everyone else didn't? The price of FTT began to plummet. And as it fell, the value of Alameda's collateral evaporated. But the real problem was the bank run. Not on a bank but on the FTX exchange. Millions of people, from hedge funds with billions of dollars to everyday people with a few $100, all had the same thought at the same time. I need to get my money out. Now. They rushed to the digital doors of FTX to withdraw their Bitcoin, their Ethereum, their US dollars. But the money wasn't there. An exchange is supposed to be a custodian, a vault. When you deposit one Bitcoin, that one Bitcoin is supposed to sit there with your name on it, waiting for you to withdraw it. It is not supposed to be lent out, traded, or gambled with. That is the cardinal rule. It's the difference between a bank and a safe deposit box. FTX sold itself as a safe deposit box. As the withdrawals mounted, $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion in a single day, the system ground to a halt. The website started showing errors. Withdrawals were pending. And then they stopped completely. The doors to the vault were slammed shut. SBF, the man who just weeks earlier was being compared to JP Morgan, took to Twitter. He typed out a now infamous tweet. FTX is fine. Assets are fine. He assured everyone that they had enough to cover all client holdings, that the issues were just technical backlogs. It was the financial equivalent of a captain telling passengers the ship wasn't sinking while standing in waist-deep water. The lie lasted less than 24 hours. In a stunning reversal that sent shockwaves through the entire financial world, SBF announced that FTX had agreed to be acquired by its arch-rival Binance. The very company that had fired the kill shot was now being called in as the savior. It was a desperate, humiliating plea for a bailout. For a brief moment, the market breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe the crisis could be contained. Maybe the big brother would step in and clean up the mess. Binance began its due diligence, the process of looking at FTX's books to see exactly what they were buying. The process didn't take long. The very next day, Binance pulled out of the deal. Their public statement was short and brutal. They said, "Our hope was to be able to support FTX's customers to provide liquidity, but the issues are beyond our control or ability to help." Beyond our control or ability to help. Let that sink in. The largest, most powerful company in the entire crypto industry looked into the black box of FTX and ran screaming in the other direction. The hole was too deep. The damage was too catastrophic. And that's when the truth, the horrifying, unbelievable truth, began to spill out. The hole in FTX's balance sheet wasn't $1 billion. It wasn't $2 billion. It was a staggering $8 billion. $8 billion of customer money that had simply vanished. Where did it go? It turned out that FTX had a secret backdoor in its software. A backdoor that allowed Sam Bankman-Fried's other company, Alameda Research, to withdraw unlimited funds from FTX. Customer funds. Your funds. They had been taking the Bitcoin and dollars you deposited, the money you thought was safe, and secretly funneling it to their hedge fund to make massive, degenerate gambles. And when those gambles went bad, they didn't lose their own money. They lost yours. This wasn't a liquidity crisis. This wasn't a bank run. This was a lie. A fraud on a scale that was almost impossible to comprehend. The wunderkind in the t-shirt and shorts, the effective altruist who wanted to save the world, the savior of the crypto industry, had been running a multi-billion-dollar slush fund with customer deposits. The collapse was total and absolute. Within a week, FTX, a company once valued at $32 billion, declared bankruptcy. Its founder, once worth over $20 billion, now had an estimated net worth of zero. Millions of customers from all over the world had their life savings vaporized overnight. trapped in an exchange that was now a crime scene. The fallout was a nuclear winter for crypto. Every major company that had touched FTX was now under suspicion. The trust that had been painstakingly built over a decade was shattered in a matter of days. Regulators who had been circling the industry now had the perfect excuse to bring down the hammer. The collapse of Terra/Luna was a wildfire. The fall of FTX was the asteroid. The boy genius was now a global pariah. His empire of code and promises had crumbled to dust, revealing a foundation of pure deception. But this wasn't just the story of one man's hubris. It was a brutal, scarring lesson for an entire generation of investors about the oldest rule in finance. If it seems too good to be true, it absolutely, positively is. The industry was now on its knees, facing an existential crisis. And in the smoldering ruins of SBF's fraud, everyone was forced to confront the terrifying reality of what they had built, and wonder if it could ever be trusted again. But a funny thing happens when you burn a forest to the ground. The sunlight, once blocked by a dense canopy of fraud and hype, can finally reach the forest floor. And in that new light, the seeds of real innovation, the ones that had been struggling for air, can finally begin to grow. The question was never whether crypto could be trusted again. The question was whether the centralized, opaque, trust-based systems built on top of crypto could be trusted. And the answer, delivered in a $20 billion fireball, was a definitive no. What emerged from the ashes of 2022 wasn't a return to the old ways. It was a painful, forced purification. Regulators, who had been circling the industry for years, descended with the full force of the law. And while many in the space cried foul, this crackdown was, in hindsight, the best thing that could have happened. It was a cleansing fire. It forced the industry to grow up, to professionalize, to stop acting like a lawless digital frontier, and start building the foundations of a legitimate, global financial system. The era of the crypto cowboy was over. The era of the builder, the regulator, and the institution had begun. And as the dust settled, a new narrative started to take shape. One that wasn't about 1000% gains or cartoon monkey pictures. It was about solving real-world problems. It was about utility. We started to see the rise of what are called real-world assets, or RWAs. The concept is simple, but its implications are profound. Imagine taking something tangible like a piece of real estate, a bar of gold, or a share of Apple stock, and creating a digital token that represents ownership of it on a blockchain. Suddenly, a 30-story office building in Manhattan doesn't have to be owned by one massive corporation. It can be tokenized into 1 million digital shares, allowing anyone on Earth with an internet connection to buy a tiny fraction of it, to own a piece of the New York City skyline for as little as $10. This isn't just a gimmick. It brings liquidity to historically illiquid markets. It makes investment opportunities that were once reserved for the ultra-wealthy accessible to everyone. It creates a level of transparency that Wall Street has fought against for a century. You can see verifiably on a public ledger who owns what without needing to trust a middleman. At the same time, decentralized finance, or DeFi, which had been the epicenter of so much reckless speculation, began its own quiet revolution. The focus shifted away from unsustainable yields and towards building resilient, secure financial plumbing. Protocols became more robust. Audits became more stringent. The entire sector started asking a different question. Not how can we create the highest return, but how can we create the most stable, most transparent, and most efficient financial services in the world? We saw the emergence of more resilient stablecoins, decentralized lending platforms that could withstand extreme market shocks, and insurance protocols that protected users from the very exploits that had plagued the early days. But the single biggest shift, the one that truly signaled the end of crypto's infancy, came from the most unlikely of places, Wall Street itself. For years, the titans of traditional finance had dismissed Bitcoin and crypto as a joke, as rat poison squared. But they weren't laughing anymore. They saw the trillions of dollars flowing into the space, and more importantly, they saw the underlying technology as a threat and an opportunity they could no longer ignore. The turning point was the fight for a spot Bitcoin ETF, or exchange-traded fund. An ETF is a regulated financial product that allows anyone with a brokerage account to buy an asset, like gold or stocks, as easily as buying a share of Coca-Cola. A Bitcoin ETF would do the same for the world's first cryptocurrency. It would be the ultimate bridge between the old world of finance and the new. For 10 years, the SEC, America's top financial regulator, had rejected every single application. But after the FTX collapse, the pressure became immense. The demand was undeniable. and the industry had finally put in the work to meet the stringent requirements of institutional-grade finance. In early 2024, the floodgates opened. The SEC approved not one, but multiple spot Bitcoin ETFs, launched by the biggest names in finance on the planet: BlackRock, Fidelity, Invesco. These aren't crypto startups. BlackRock alone manages over $10 trillion in assets. Their entry wasn't just a stamp of approval. It was a fundamental rewiring of the global financial system. It provided a safe, regulated, and incredibly simple on-ramp for trillions of dollars of institutional and retirement capital to flow into the digital asset space. And just a few months later, they did the same for Ethereum. The message was clear. Crypto was no longer a fringe asset class. It was a permanent and essential part of the modern investment landscape. This massive demand shock from institutions collided with a pre-programmed supply shock that is unique to Bitcoin: the halving. As we've learned, every 4 years, the number of new Bitcoin created is cut in half. This event, which occurred again in 2024, systematically reduces the inflation rate of the asset, making it scarcer over time. So you have a scenario that is almost poetic. At the exact moment the largest financial institutions in the world created a fire hose of new demand, the protocol itself automatically turned down the supply. It's a perfect storm of economic forces, one that demonstrates the power of a system governed by code, not by the whims of a central bank or a CEO. So, after this 10-part journey from a mysterious white paper in 2008, through the soaring highs of bull markets and the crushing lows of fraud and collapse, to the dawn of institutional adoption, where does that leave you? It leaves you at the very beginning of the next chapter. The knowledge you've built isn't just trivia. It's a lens through which to view the future. You now understand the fundamental difference between a centralized database and a blockchain. You know the importance of self-custody and the meaning of not your keys, not your coins. You've seen how human greed can co-opt a decentralized technology, and how the technology's core principles can ultimately survive and grow stronger from the attack. Building your knowledge from scratch in 2025 is a profoundly different experience than it was in 2021 or 2017. The get-rich-quick noise is fading, replaced by the signal of genuine innovation. The guardrails are being built. The use cases are becoming tangible. This is no longer just a speculative bet. It's an exploration of a new technological and financial paradigm. Your journey from here is your own. Perhaps you'll be inspired to learn how to hold your own assets in a hardware wallet, finally achieving true financial sovereignty. Maybe you'll explore the world of decentralized applications and see firsthand what a user-owned internet could look like. Or maybe you'll simply use this knowledge to better understand the news, to see past the headlines, and to make more informed decisions about your own financial future. The goal was never to tell you what to think about crypto. It was to give you the tools to think about it, to cut through the hype, the fear, and the complexity, and to see this technology for what it is: a grand experiment in human coordination, a new set of tools for building more open, transparent, and equitable systems. The story of crypto is far from over. It is, and always has been, a story about the future. And now you have a foundation to understand it, a foothold to participate in it, and the clarity to decide for yourself what role you want to play as it's being built.